Charles, we're hearing reports out of Russia that Putin was the victim of a possible assassination attempt led by the Ukrainian government. And the Russians are blaming Ukraine on this attempt to assassinate Vladimir Putin. But what Russia is about to do, they're going to say that the Ukrainian government never would have pulled this attempt without it being sanctioned by the American government. For the American government has been the biggest financial supporter and weapons supplier to the Ukrainian government to defend themselves against the Russian invasion. I think that this could possibly be a fake smokescreen to justify Russia declaring war on America or labeling America as a terrorist state against the Russian government. I believe that this is all a part of a wider plan to justify an attack against America.
Well, I don't see the Russian government attacking America. I think really our military prowess greatly outweighs that of both Russia and China. I do agree with you that this seems to be yet another movement towards World War III, which I find horrifying. But you've seen a lot of American, quote unquote patriots in the last year since the aggression of Putin against the Ukraine that have taken the tact that somehow Putin is this good guy, that he was just trying to prevent the expansion of NATO, that he's just a leader trying to protect what's his. And it's all incredibly false. For one thing, Putin has actually assassinated people all over the world extrajudicially in a horrifying manner, using poisons that then also killed just regular people that happen to be in the room or touch the objects, using radiation and other things. He is probably the greatest thief in the world. Some people think he's worth $1 trillion. He is a man that went from the KGB, the evil secret service of the Soviet Russia, to become the dictator of Russia. He's not, this isn't a democracy. He has taken any dissident voices and jailed people for decades. When people talk about pro-Putin, they're doing it because they're ignorant of the realities of what Vladimir Putin is and what he has done both to Russians and to the world. He's a disgusting criminal. But I don't believe that he's telling the truth about this. When you look at those drone attacks, they didn't really seem like drone attacks. They seem like a false flag. And we hear that statement by these radicals in America talking about mass shootings being a false flag. But this, I do agree with you, this is just a vehicle for Putin to be able to justify targeted attacks against Zelensky and other leaders in the Ukraine. I think it was all a fake. I think Putin is a monster, and I don't...
I think it's bigger than that, Charles.
Well, how bigger do you think it is?
I believe that we're in a proxy war with Russia right now.
Okay.
Because we've been supplying the Ukrainian government and their military weapons, cash, etc. So we have supported the killing of Russian soldiers. I believe that Vladimir Putin, it's not beyond his reach or scope to try to pull off a terrorist attack inside of America or against one of America's allies, because Putin has done similar things in the past in other countries. This is a man that has sponsored, like you said, the assassination of those who disagree with the Russian government in other countries. Now, if he would do that and somebody just offended him with word, what would he do now when he thinks America sponsored an attempt on his life? Who also did the same thing? George Bush Jr. says Saddam Hussein tried to assassinate his father and used that as part of the justification to invade Iraq and dethrone Saddam Hussein and have him assassinated. America has done some similar things that Putin has done. When you say that Putin jails and kills dissident voices who disagree with the Putin government, well, did not America do the same thing to Malcolm X and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.? Did not America do the same thing to Patrice Lumumba in Africa? So America is just as guilty as Russia is of doing the same things to our own citizens right here as Russia's done with hers.
That is an incredibly ignorant statement of the fact of both. First of all, we have a free speech clause in the United States. And while you can compare...
And many black folks have been killed and murdered under alleged free speech. When they murdered the Black Panther Party ship leaders, when they wiretapped and framed Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and J. Edgar Hoover tried to get him to kill himself. And J. Edgar Hoover took credit for the assassination of Malcolm X, to where here recently the state of New York exonerated the 3 men who were found guilty and apologized to their families because they said the government government was involved in that assassination. And they cleared those 3 men. America has documented proof through Operation COINTELPRO, the counterintelligence program, of discrediting and physically assassinating leaders who disagreed with American government, America's racist policies.
Call me completely shocked. Color me shocked that you managed to turn a discussion about the possible Ukraine assassination attempt on Vladimir Putin into America sucking and we're all racist, okay? But that's not the subject at hand. First of all, America's done tons of horrible stuff, right? The vehicle of Jim Crow. J. Edgar Hoover was a monster who abused all types of civil liberties, not just of African Americans, but countless white people. The McCarthyism of the late 40s and the 50s, the Red Scare. America's done horrible stuff. We've been in this never-ending war. Now, let's not forget, Saddam Hussein attacked and invaded Kuwait first, and we had to repel them, right? He did invade, much like Russia's invading Ukraine. So let's not act like, but America went into Iraq on the lie of
weapons of mass destruction,
weapons of WMDs. But in fact, Saddam did try to have George Herbert Walker Bush killed. That's not a myth. He tried to have it assassinated.
So we gonna declare war against a whole country and its government because somebody tried to kill your daddy?
I have absolutely disagreed with the war in Iraq since the beginning. I agreed with Natalie Maines of the Dixie Chicks when everybody was condemning her. I disagree with the thought of American boots being on the ground and millions of Iraqi civilians
and the American government worked with the Italian mafia to try to assassinate Fidel Castro because he had a communist government that was friendly with Russia, and they did not want Russia putting nuclear weapons in Cuba 90 miles from America. And so they supported an assassination attempt working with the Italian mafia to kill Castro. America's just as guilty as Russia is.
Okay, America is not just as guilty as Russia. We're a constitutional republic where rights are protected by the Constitution. The problem at the beginning of America is that those rights were only limited to white male property owners and not everybody else, so just rich white men. That, of course, but they provided a framework that has been expanded and is appropriately expanded, where in Russia, you don't have any civil rights. Russia is a country that's ruled by a despot who is taking him and his oligarch friends, and they're all taking trillions of dollars, stealing it from the people. It's defined by its poverty, and Vladimir Putin is not the same as any president, whether you like him or not. Donald Trump, Joe Biden, Barack Obama, George W. Bush, his daddy, Clinton. You can't compare any of those men, even the ones that were warmongers, to the great evil of Vladimir Putin. And this is the new mythology, whether it's the far left or the far right. Everything, oh, America sucks, America sucks. Oh, Vladimir Putin's evil, well, America sucks. And this is what you do. You condemn America constantly while you profiteer off that condemnation. Quannel, you manufacture grievance to live your wonderful life. I'm glad you're living a wonderful life, but stop lying about America every day.
The success of one mere black man or woman does not supersede the entire suffering of the masses of his or her people. Dr. Carter G. Woodson, the founder of Black History, said, no black man or woman, no matter what their success, can rise above the condition of the masses of his or her people. My individual success don't mean a damn thing if the masses of my brothers and sisters are still suffering. America has done some horrible things, but America should not throw rocks because she lives in a glass house. She's just as guilty as these other governments.
Okay, if America's the glass house, why are so many millions of people fighting to get to this country so they can taste it, economic opportunity and the brass ring of freedom? It's just professional grievance. Of course you can say, oh, well, I make all my money, but I'm still upset, so let me make some more money by just being upset.
Charles,
right? We're not even talking about white America. We're talking about the Ukraine and Russia. No, you actually belittle everyone with your nonsense.
When you try to make it look as though
literally,
your only argument that you have
Russia
is
and
a
the
personal
Ukraine,
attack against
and you
me.
Still, no.
Your personal attacks against me is what white folks have always done to black leaders. Every time a black leader would stand up and speak the truth, white people like you would try to point out something about that black leader that you don't like, or critique them or criticize them to try to weaken their credibility or influence with their own people instead of fighting them on the merits and the facts of the argument or the debate. See, you are a master of that because you can't beat me with the facts. You try to make a personal attack. Let me tell you something, partner. You will never kill the message, but you can't attack the messenger.
Well, again, we were talking about Russia and the Ukraine, and you turned it into a condemnation of America, which is par for the course.
And you try to turn it into a personal attack.
A condemnation.
Are people not buying that game no more, brother?
Condemnation of white people. Again, and what you're doing is talking
it's not
about white people.
I never said white people.
Oh, you said it repeatedly. Y'all can run it back. You talk about you white people do this. I'm not talking about African American people. I'm talking about you.
I said America is just as guilty, Charles. America wants to point out the faults and the evil of other nations when she has participated in some of the same exact behaviors. Malcolm X said it great when Dr. Kennedy was assassinated. They asked him how did he feel. He said it's the case of the chickens coming home to roost. Because America has participated in the assassination of other leaders worldwide who was against the best interests of America's foreign policy or America's corporate empire. What I'm saying is that game is over now, Charles. China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Mexico, Brazil, Venezuela, all of those countries are coming together now, challenging and bucking America and saying they will no longer be dominated by her power. America must do something different, man. Barack Obama tried to change America's image worldwide, but it has grossly failed. And that's why the nations are coming together now to make war with America.
I always know you're not going to say anything of substance when you start interrupting me and yelling, right? We were talking about Russia.
Forgive me, I do apologize.
We talked about Russia and the Ukraine and whether or not this was a valid assassination attempt. But you did manage to turn it into why white people suck, which is par for the course.
Said that.
And yes, you did. And frankly, I'm not talking about black leaders. I'm talking about your ability to use smoke and mirrors and everything to find some grievance, even when we're talking about something completely unrelated. Americans' foreign policy, I've been a critic of it for decades. We shouldn't have been in the Middle East. We shouldn't have killed so many innocent Iraqis. We shouldn't be regime changing. We should have been in Afghanistan. The only thing we should have done in Afghanistan is went and killed Osama bin Laden and got out of it, right? We need to stop telling other countries how to live. But typically, America's not just invading like Saddam did to Kuwait,
look what
like
Hillary
Russia
Clinton
is doing
did.
to Ukraine.
Hillary Clinton
I know. They're all evil. All these,
and sponsored
everybody but Barack
the
Obama is
assassination
evil.
of Muammar Gaddafi.
Let's talk about
Hillary Clinton made and facilitated
you mean
with the
when
CIA
Barack Obama was
in
the president
capture and the
so
killing
wait.
of Muammar Gaddafi.
But
and
who
look
was
what Libya is
president
now.
then? Who was president
Barack
then?
Obama.
Okay, well, you were just saying he tried to raise
and let me say this.
And I wonder why
Let me
you were
say
picking
this.
Barack Obama's
Barack
team. I wonder
Obama-
what it is about Barack Obama
bowed down
that,
to Hillary Clinton's desire to
okay.
assassinate Muammar
So the
Gaddafi.
president bowed down to his Secretary
Yes, he
of
did.
State.
And I'm going to
Okay.
tell you something, man.
Okay.
Blood is on Barack Obama's hands.
Oh, wow.
Because
you're actually
Libya,
criticizing someone.
Because Libya, before Muammar Gaddafi was assassinated, do you realize why they killed Muammar Gaddafi? Libya didn't have no debt. Libya was a debt-free nation, brother. Secondly, Libya was 30 days from implementing a whole new currency. They were going completely away from the American dollar before Chinese were saying about doing it. The Russians and anyone else, they killed that man, and now Libya is a third world looking country right now when it was a beautiful nation when Muammar Gaddafi was in charge. Was he perfect? No. But he wasn't no worse than Vladimir Putin. He wasn't no worse than Mr. Yin in China. He was absolutely evil, but we've done nothing to kill them.
Well, I don't think we want to start a world war, and I will agree. Muammar Gaddafi, although a state sponsor of terror or the Lockerbie bombing, I mean, he did a lot of horrible things, especially in the 80s, and allowed extremism to use Libya as a base to terrorize Western Europe and the world. But at the end of the day, he also had an incredibly secular government, an incredibly safe and successful society, much like Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein was armed by the American government because he had a secular government and he provided a buffer with the extremism of Iran, right? And that's why we gave him all the weapons until we decided we didn't like him because he, much like Putin, decided to be aggressive to his neighbors. Kuwait had never done anything to Saddam Hussein. He just rolled his tanks in there and burned a bunch of fields. But that war was about oil. It wasn't about an attempt on George W. Herbert Walker Bush. It wasn't about the actual invasion of Kuwait. It was about protecting the interests of major petrochemical companies. The invasion of Afghanistan was about a pipeline. mind. It wasn't about removing the Taliban.
So then you agree with everything I'm saying?
No, I don't.
America has done a lot of
I don't
evil.
agree with anything you're saying because you're full of crap.
And she wants to condemn other nations for the very same behaviors.
I disagree with our foreign policy, but what this started with was you talking about how Americans treat the government treats its citizens the same as Russia treats its citizens.
This is true.
It's absolutely not true.
Now think about this. There's a whole sect of Muslims in China.
Why are
in
Russians
China right now,
coming here?
Right now,
why are Mexicans coming here? Why are Guatemalans coming here? Why are Venezuelans coming here? Why are Chinese people
in those concentration camps?
In a hole
those
across
Muslims
a
are
ship
being
to get here?
tortured by the Chinese government. But do you realize that when America went to war with Japan, she put Japanese American citizens in concentration camps also?
We put them in internment camps.
America
it's a
has done
horrible
the same
place.
thing,
They were
man.
not liquidation
We
or
just
concentration
as guilty
camps.
as
They're
we
incredibly
accuse
different.
other nations.
And there's actually been, America has made it very clear that that was a horrible thing. Now,
So we can't pretend like we don't live in a glass house,
Well, we
Charles.
can. That was 100 years ago almost, 90 years ago, and America has conceded that but it wasn't a concentration camp. It wasn't what the Germans were doing to Jews. I know
they
you
were
don't
not being
care
put
about
in
the
oven.
Jews,
I agree.
but those were concentration
I agree.
camps. Those were liquidation
The abuse
camps.
was not the
What
same
is going on
degree,
in China
but they were
to
put in
the your
concentration
people
camps.
is a liquidation camp, a concentration camp designed to kill people. There were internment camps for the Japanese, and that's not parsing. It's horrible. But it's not parsing. They're very
Charles,
different things.
America
And it's just like when you
does
try to
not
talk
have
about
the moral
America,
authority to criticize other nations' behavior when America's documented that we've done some of the very things that we accuse other countries of doing.
Well,
Charles.
you're sitting here
and
saying
the American
that.
people
You're sitting
are
here
not, the American
on
people
television
are ignorant. The
saying
majority
that.
of us are ignorant to America's foreign policy and her secret practices against other governments. If the American people truly knew that everything that America has done in the name of America's foreign policy, we probably would lead a revolt in this country. There's a book that was written by a beautiful white man called Confessions of an Economic Hitman, where this man worked for the CIA and talked about the things that America did to undermine, destabilize, and rob other nations of their natural resources so that America could wax rich and strong. Look, man, we are just as guilty as we're trying to accuse other nations of being. We want to talk about Russia invading Crimea. Yeah, he was wrong for that, but we was just as wrong invading Iraq. So Russia says to us, who are you to question us or condemn us or call us out when we just watch you do the same thing in Iraq?
And here you are being a shill for Putin. But what's interesting...
No, I'm no shill for Putin because Putin don't love black people. Putin don't give a damn about black people. Okay. So let's not pretend like I care about Vladimir Putin. I'm pointing out facts.
You seem to think he's wonderful, but here's a big difference that you're not going to be able... I'll be interested in seeing you refute. You're sitting here on television in America complaining and calling America awful, right? And you can do that for two things, both found in the First Amendment, the Free Speech Clause and the Free Press Clause. If you did this in Russia, you would be handcuffed as you left and it would never air anywhere. But in America, we have the freedom to criticize the government. You don't have that freedom in Russia. People are spending decades in prison for mere criticism of Putin, decades in prison for merely running against Putin. He has a history of absurdist oppression, and you can't reconcile that with a comparison to America. The foreign policy is also very different. The oppression that goes on in that country, I'm not saying there's not bad foreign policy in America. I hate all the warmongering. There are clearly things in our criminal justice system that need to be fixed, but to compare it to Russia and say that there's a false equivalence there is dishonest. And you make these dishonest comments because that's your game. That's what you do. You condemn, you take everything, even a discussion about Ukraine and Russia, and as a vehicle to condemn not just America, but white people in America, as if we're some holistic group of non-individuals. It's bigotry.
Asking America to look in the mirror. And let me say something, man. Russia has done a lot of horrible things, yes. But in this country, we have to repent, man, and atone for a lot of the evil and wrong that we have done also, Charles. A lot of countries across the earth are so angry with America because they know what she has done to underdevelop, undermine, and destroy their internal infrastructure for our own benefit. America must plot a new course, man, because our economic power that we waved over the whole world, that economic power is now dwindling very fast. Our military power, where we only had to deal with Russia, That's gone now. Now you got India, North Korea, you got Russia, you got China, just as strong as we are, if not stronger. So the two powers that America used, her money and her military might, are not what they used to be. So America must plot a new course, because if we don't, we're proceeding forth into our own destruction.
One, China's military is not comparable to ours, despite the fact that a lot of people, I mean, you can make stuff up, but that's just what you do.
Oh, yes,
but one thing that America does more than everybody is foreign aid, right? And unlike China, who engages in foreign aid, but it's tied to allowing them to expand their oppressive type of despotism and authoritarianism, but they still don't give a fraction of what America gives in aid to countries, doing wonderful things, making sure there's potable water, making sure there's schools. America has done a lot all around the world for centuries, and there's not another country that has done nearly as much. But you don't see that, right? In fact, you probably see it.
When you say for centuries,
what you have to do is say America's evil, America's evil, America's evil.
I would agree with you.
Because that benefits you. And if Vladimir Putin came and offered you some money to say, hey, Vladimir's wonderful, you'd just be sitting there, hey, Vladimir's wonderful. And there's something,
let me tell you why I wouldn't say that. Let me tell you why I wouldn't say that.
Let's hear another lie.
Because see, one thing about a man like Vladimir Putin, he's never going to give you some money if he can't own you.
Okay.
And so one thing I have been blessed by God's grace, no white man has ever been allowed to own me and my voice. And I've been offered millions. But I'll be damned any of them can claim ownership of Quannel X. Charles, America's changing, man. We are not the driving force we were 25 years ago,
you fixed
30 years ago.
Did you get rid of the white people? Is that what?
Let me be honest with you, how America fixed this. I don't think it's fixable, because the military power that we used to have, the superiority we used to have militarily wise, we don't have anymore.
That's not accurate.
Because China and Russia together, along with North Korea, come on, brother, we don't have that power like that anymore.
Russia can't even take over the Ukraine.
But remember, they both can fight a nuclear war with us now. And that's mad, mutual assured destruction. We can't win a war like that like we used to. And I'm going to tell you something, Charles.
We can never win a nuclear war.
When's the last time America won a war?
Well, I completely agree that
we didn't win in Vietnam. We didn't win in Iraq. We did not win in Afghanistan. When last time America really won a war, brother? Let's be honest about that.
I mean, we did win in Iraq, but they didn't.
No, we ain't win in Iraq, brother.
War.
Let me tell you something. The very wicked people we said were the greatest threats to America, these terrorists, are now in charge in Iraq. The very ones we wanted to get rid of in Iraq, ISIS in particular, they still run around Iraq like it's modern day child's play. Look, man, we didn't win in Iraq, brother. We have not truly won a war.
We won the conflict, but all we did is kill a bunch of innocent people. But
that's all. We ain't won
what
a war,
America
man.
needs to accept is that we cannot regime change in extremist Muslim countries, right? We can't force people to embrace democracy. We can't force people to say, hey, we're not going to be extremist, right? There are so many people in Iran, so many wonderful Muslim people in Iran that are suffering from that despotic extremist regime, right? Women who are being beat to death and jailed for dancing or not wearing a headscarf, right? But what we can do in America is build a place where freedoms are ensured by a constitution and by a rule of law, that people can immigrate to this country and participate in this wonderful country. So when I hear you talk about how awful, how glass houses in America can't talk and talk about things 40 or 50 years ago to condemn people today, at the end of the day, there is a reason. There is a reason why people risk their lives to come to this country, because America is the heart of freedom for the world. Now, we're doing things wrong. We need to fix stuff.
America cannot change, Charles.
If you talk about no one owns you, at the end of the day, you are perpetual grievance.
The people of this country take their country back.
Okay.
Corporate America owns the political structure, infrastructure, and direction of the American government. It's not the American people. That's why the politicians see the people as servants of them, not servants of the people. What policy changes do you want to see occur? To be honest with you,
before Americans can criticize Russia?
One of the biggest policy changes is, which the Supreme Court ruled against, but yet we see how corrupt they are too now, don't we? We need to pass a law that corporate entities can no longer donate to political campaigns.
Well, they did pass a law. Then the Supreme Court said that law was an inappropriate violation of the free speech.
Because had we known what Clarence Thomas was doing, And the other guy up there
I mean,
with
it
him.
is interesting to see everyone condemning Clarence Thomas. I actually have far more issue with Chief Justice Roberts'
They
wife
both. We
making
see what's
$10
going
million off it. But we also
That's
see
why corruption and
Dianne Feinstein
corruption has taken
is
over
worth
America.
$200 million. There's corruption replete, and it's interesting.
And they've taken over our politics,
It's
man.
interesting that Matt Gaetz, extreme right wing, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, extreme left wing, have come together to push forward a bill that would prevent members of Congress from trading. Right? We had a senator sell all her First Republic stock right before the collapse. We have people that go to Washington to make a few $100,000 a year who leave after 10 years worth hundreds of millions of dollars because of disgusting corruption. And really, the only reason the media is focusing on the Supreme Court right now, not because anything changed, but because the media and AOC and others are trying to delegitimize the Supreme Court because it's impacting their agenda. I don't agree with all the Supreme Court's rulings. I take issue with a bunch of it. But at the end of the day, maybe talk about glass houses, maybe our Congress people should look at that. But we didn't start talking about this. What we started talking about was Russia and Ukraine. I don't believe that the Ukrainian government tried to assassinate Putin. I don't agree with your assessment that America can't criticize and Americans can't criticize Putin, or if there's any sort of equivalency between America and Russia. Russia is a despotic country headed by a leader that has probably stole over $1 trillion from his own people. People live in poverty and they have no freedom. Russians do whatever they can, the people that aren't aristocratic oligarchs, to get to Western Europe, to get to America. Just like the Chinese, they can sneak out of China and fight their way to get here unless they're part of the aristocracy. But even billionaires from China want to escape and get over here. We have people, you talk about Venezuela, you talk about Brazil, both defined by overwhelming poverty, and tons of people want to leave that country and come to America. Why do they want to come to America? Because in America, you can work hard, or you can just say a bunch of ugly crap about America and you can be very successful. And you don't have that opportunity in other countries. In America, you can criticize your government. In America, you have defined rights. Do we need to fix some crap? Of course we do. But when you compare America to Russia, you know you're lying. That's why you don't live in Russia.
I'm comparing America's behavior to other nations, including Russia.
And it's a false equivalency.
That's been identical.
It hasn't been identical.
Now let's say if Russia is lying about this assassination attempt. Because you don't believe it, right?
Right.
But they would not tell this type of lie if they didn't have a bigger plan that includes America.
Right. I don't think
so.
I agree with you.
If they are lying,
I'm glad after all this talking we agree Russia's evil.
So if they're lying, they're doing something similar to what America did. America wanted to justify entering the war, and so she lied about the sinking of the Lusitania to justify entering the war. So let me say this to you, Matt. Let me say this to you, Charles. All of us are in trouble in this country because the nation does not belong to the people anymore. And so the politicians are pushing forth party agendas and not the agendas in the best interest of the American people. The American government, in the name of a foreign policy, has made enemies for common American people, and we have no idea what they're doing in the name of that policy.
I couldn't disagree more. Let me say this. I think people come to America because they want freedom. I think people are free to criticize, even dishonestly criticize this government. And we do have politicians we're being defined by the extremism of social media, and I think that's a bad idea. But America is still the best country in the game. America is still the place where you can come with no money and make a whole lot of money if you're willing to work hard and dedicate yourself. And that's why Russians come here, that's why Chinese come here, and that's why you're here, Quannel. That's
and
why we're all here.
I would rather live nowhere else.
Well, it's nice to hear you say that.
But right here in America. But what I see in this nation, we have eroded the very foundational principles
Absolutely not
that
true.
made the nation great.
Everyone gets more free every day.
We are
the best America we've ever been today, and we were the best America yesterday, and tomorrow will be even better.
No, I doubt that very seriously.
God bless America.
And God bless us, because we need God all day, every day in America right now.